In the Vajrayana Buddhist teachings in the Tantra, there's a part that talks about the five wisdoms. Five wisdoms, not understood as being, how can I say, what we mean normally by wisdom, like a mind free from ignorance, but a wisdom, an aspect of our minds in this specific context. And the five, there are two types of the five wisdoms: the basis, of like ordinary beings, like us, and the wisdoms of the result, the five wisdoms of a being who has reached his maximum potential, let's say a Buddha. For many years, I tried, in a long period, over a long period, I tried to understand these five wisdoms. You hear them everywhere. Every time there's an empowerment, you hear about the five wisdoms. In self-healing, there's the five wisdoms, the five Dhyani Buddhas, and the five great mothers. They're the embodiment of these five wisdoms. But but I but I want to understand. You know, I need I need to really understand things, with my logical mind, and it was a little difficult for me. Until one day I was reading a commentary on the practice of Guya Samatha, and this description of the five wisdoms really opened up a door for me so that I could understand in a clearer way. And I just I, you know, I wanted to talk about one of the five, but the five very quickly are so the five wisdoms. First of all, the five wisdoms of the basis are five aspects that we all have, and this really beautiful when we talk about a Buddha, because all the characteristics of a Buddha have a corresponding aspect in us. There's no quality that a Buddha has that doesn't have the corresponding moment of the basis that we have. So our qualities that are the Buddha is us, to develop the maximum potential. So the five wisdoms of the basis. Let's start with Buddha Mogassiddhi. So all accomplishing wisdom of the basis, and jokingly, I I I call it the wisdom that doesn't accomplish much, because it's a characteristic of our mind, um, that says I want to do this or I want to do that. So we have the certainty, but we also have doubt. It's this aspect of our mind that goes towards action, goes towards interacting and to doing. So we all have this aspect in our minds. Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I go there? Should I go here? Etc., etc. In this moment, it's we have clarity about doing and not doing things, but often we also have a lot of doubts. Oh, maybe it's better to do this instead of that. And this is part of this trait of the mind. The second characteristic that is related to Buddha Ratnasambhava at our navel chakra refers to the wisdom of equanimity. It's our ability at the basis to perceive similarities among things, among among phenomena, people, places, things. As I see you, for example, I know that you're all different, but you're all human beings. At least you appear to me as such. So I'm able to put you together to see something that's similar among you and put you in one category, a similar category. I tried once to imagine our mind without this ability. How would our perception of the world be if we weren't able to perceive similarities and unite things into categories, it would be very chaotic. Be very difficult to perceive, interact, and relate with everything. Today, we're able to perceive certain similarities and others we don't perceive at all. If we develop this wisdom more, then we will see that we're not just human beings, but we also all want to be happy and we don't want to suffer. We see that that we're all interdependent, impermanent. So we would see common factors that will really unite us more. The next, let's jump Akshobhya and we can go to Buddha Amitabha. Buddha Amitabha is the wisdom of discernment. So the wisdom of discernment is the opposite of the wisdom of equanimity, but they complements it. It's our ability today to discern between one thing or another. As equanimity talks about, is this aspect of being able to see similarities and instead when to distinguish, to discern is this ability to see what is different. So I could be able to interact with everything and everyone with in relation to the particular aspects, specific access. Imagine what it would be like to have a mind, a wisdom of equanimity, but without being able to distinguish one thing from another. It would be impossible to 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 interact. And the more our wisdom of discernment is developed, the more we're able to see the particularities, the specifics of every phenomenon. But equanimity and discernment, they're not contradictory, they're complementary, these two wisdoms. This is fundamental. So the fact, for example, if I have 5 children, yes, they're all my children, and I love them all the same way as my children, but that doesn't keep me from being able to see the specific different traits of each one, see how they're different, and I'm able to interact with them, also based on their differences. I mean, people say, "Oh, they're all my children. I need to treat them all in the same way." I have to because they're equal, but that doesn't work because they're different. And if you treat them, you know, my idea of equanimity is treating with the same love. If I'm to treat you all with equanimity, um, you know, for equanimity to work, I can't do the same thing for each one. Imagine I'm a doctor and I treat all of my patients with equanimity. So, so one needs an antibiotic, I'm giving antibiotics to everyone. That wouldn't work. One that has a stomach ache, okay, medicine, against stomach ache for everyone, equanimity for everyone. This is not equanimity. Equanimity is wanting the well-being of each one in the same way and giving the same energy to everyone, um, giving the best to each one, to adapting oneself to the specific needs and characteristics of others. I remember there was someone in the Sangha of Brazil who told me that he had many, many siblings, like 10, and the father was a lovely person, but extremely busy. He worked a lot, and he didn't have a lot of time to be with the kids, but he did something very intelligent. So, except beyond the small, the short times that they were able to be all together, but he would create times during the week, for each child to be alone with him, and he would adapt the activity to the child. Paint with his daughter, go play soccer with another child. So even if It wasn't a lot of time, but they all felt like they were extremely close to him because the father not only saw them as his children, but he was able to interact with them in in their specific nature and giving them space to develop according to their needs and traits. So here we talk about how important it is to have equanimity and discernment together. They're complementary, they're not contradictory. This is important to remember. And the second to last wisdom, Vairocana, at our crown chakra has to do with it is called the wisdom that's um, the um, the is our ability to perceive what appears to us. It's wisdom clear as a mirror. Um, like how many phenomena appear to us among what we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we taste, what we touch. I mean, there's an enormous amount of information that gets to us. Once in a documentary, I heard that every second our brain receives 2 billion pieces of information, of which we're aware conceptually of 2,000. So, so, so this wisdom is our ability is to reflect everything that appears to our senses with awareness. So the more this wisdom is developed, the more aware we are of the phenomena around us, and the less it's developed, then the less we see. We're not able to perceive what is around us. And here is a very important point that connects with what I want to explain after. Let's go straight to metaphor. Let's imagine that here at a certain point, there's they're digging. Let's imagine that there's someone outside, breaking stone, breaking stone with an electric uh, and then there's someone outside also with an electric drill, and then there's also someone here singing, opera, and then there's also someone, reciting a mantra very softly, and then there's also our heartbeat. Are we able to hear the recitation of the mantra, the soft recitation, when there are so many other noises? No, but does it exist? Yes, but why can't we perceive it? We can't hear it because we're just overwhelmed by louder noises and our senses. It's difficult to perceive more subtle things when there are more coarse level things. That's for all of our senses. Um, it's a little clearer with our hearing. So if someone's outside breaking stone, or you stop the man outside, breaking the stone, and you stop the electric power drill and the one singing loudly, then we can hear the mantra, and if that is not there, then maybe we can also hear our the beating of our own heart. There are, for example, these rooms that are completely protected, and they're you can't they're completely soundproof, and they use them for certain experiments, and they're underground, they're very protected. There's one that's the greatest, the one that has the most soundproofing is from made by Microsoft, and they use it also for testing. Um, and they need an area where there's no interference. So one needs to get used to being in a room, and when you're there, normally the door is always open because the world record for being closed in a room like that, a soundproof room, is 40 minutes, because when one is inside, one starts hearing the sound of one's own heartbeat, or the of the joints moving, or even a kind of a slight noise of the blood running through the veins, and it's very uncomfortable, and it sounds very, very loud. And then one needs to walk out of the room very slowly, because one feels like one is absolutely bombarded with noise. So our senses adapt to this external um, 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 sensory stimuli. So we are now so stimulated by course level things, even information, or what we see on many levels, that what happens is that we're losing contact with our ability of intuition, our ability to perceive more subtle things. I remember this doctor in Nepal, Manovajra. He was the doctor of the king. Unfortunately, the one who then was killed. Anyway, uh, aside from that, he was the doctor of the king, and he was extremely wise, and he was an Ayurvedic doctor, and at the same time, he was very humble. Um, he could have opened up a beautiful clinic instead. Instead, he had a very small a medical studio. I went to him a couple of times myself, and he would visit. He he would he would see his patients. There would be a little curtain, and then there were a few patients waiting outside. And there's often the curtain would be open. There's no privacy at all, and he'd close it when someone would need to lie down. And it happened that once I went to him, someone came with me, and at a certain point afterwards, he looked at the person and he said, "And you?" And the person said, "No, no, I'm accompanying him." He said, "But you don't feel this, that, and the other?" And he described his symptoms to him perfectly. And and my friend was shocked. I see how you walk. I observed you. I perceived you. He was an incredible doctor. I had problems, for years, and he was able to resolve my problem, in right away. I had pain that went from the back of my neck here, that went all the way to my fingers, and I needed to do a retreat, and and it was painful for me to stay in that position, you know. And I went to him, and it was my liver. I said, "What?" You know, um, you know, I thought, what does the liver have to do with my neck? But instead, it had to do with the purification and the circulation, um, and so he, so uh, he gave me he whatever he gave me. It cured me. It never came back, and he was a man that had this ability to perceive on a subtle level. Would see you, and and he would see what normally we don't see, because he had that sensitivity. And our senses very often to develop a greater sensitivity that we all have, but many of us are not able to listen to it because we are overwhelmed by more coarse level objects. It's like, when we read the news or we read something, we're we're so used to the overt meaning that we lose our ability to read between the lines or see from another perspective um, we lose our intuition, we lose this sensitivity because we're overwhelmed by more gross level senses. So, in the more developed this wisdom of the clear like a mirror, you know, it's said that a Buddha can perceive every phenomena that appears. So a Buddha would be able to actually perceive with awareness the 2 billion pieces of information that he sees. The fifth wisdom is called the wisdom of Dharmadhatu. It's not a characteristic of the mind, but is the mind itself, independently of its characteristics. With it's the mind with mental defilements or with mental defilements. So it means that our mind in its nature is not jealous or envious. I mean, these are aspects of the mind that come and they go, but they're not part of the nature of our mind because our mind, our being, independently of all of these characteristics that it has, um, this was called the wisdom of Dharmadhatu, which is very difficult to translate. Dharma is phenomenon, and dhatu is ultimate space. It means the ultimate nature of the mind. Of these five wisdoms, and they're all important, but I wanted to talk about the one of Amoghasiddhi today, the all-accomplishing wisdom. I remember Lama Michel Rinpoche once, many, many years ago. He would say, when I came to the West, I went to a supermarket and I saw how much stress there is at the supermarket, and it was stressful for me too. I needed to buy toothpaste. But which one should I take? There were so many to choose from, so many different types. And we're talking about the 1980s. I mean, you can imagine today. Many prices, many choices, many possibilities. And at a certain point, he said, this generates stress. It's easier, in the communist world, there's like one toothpaste, that's the one to use. And we would say, okay, maybe middle ground wouldn't be bad. But the point, what is it? Is it just an analogy that he would use? Making choices generates stress. When we are faced with something, or we have to say, shall I do this or should I do that? Between these two things, which should I do? Taking decisions, making choices is something that very often uses up our energy. Often it generates tension inside. In our modern times, we have increased tremendously the amount of choices that we need to make, even small choices, and apparently unimportant, but it doesn't take away that stress that's generated. Once it was much less. I mean, where does the stress from making choices come? I think when we relate to the world, to people, objects, things, phenomenon, through our mental image, through an idea of how that thing is going to be. So I'm in a restaurant and I take a menu and I imagine one dish instead of another, or I imagine, oh, how is it going to be if I eat this? How is it going to be if I eat that? Um, and we try to imagine the future and create a present that's going to correspond to that future. I don't know if that's clear. When we need to make a choice, very often we burden ourselves with um, with foreseeing the future. So, and it's an enormous amount of responsibility to try to make the present correspond with the future. When we're in front of a choice, often, what weighs on us is this question: will it be like this? Which choice is better? Is it really going to happen like this? And in this process, we try to imagine how the future will be, something that we're not able to do. I'm able to manage this a little bit myself better, starting from an idea that made me relax a little bit, and it was, whatever choice I make, it's not going to be the right one. In the sense that any choice I make is going to bring positive results and negative results. Some will correspond to what I imagine and others not. And some will say, well, then how can I make choices? First of all, let's start with this presupposition, and let's take away that burden of having to make the right choice. Remembering that not choosing is a choice. Should I go right or should I go left? Okay, I won't neither. Well, that is also a choice, because should I say this? Should I say that? I don't say anything. That's also a choice. Not acting is an action. I didn't I didn't do anything. Yeah, it's something you did. So let's start with from two ideas. We don't have any choice but to choose, and any choice that we make, it will not be perfect. It will have its pros and cons. So we just go forward. We need to move. And in this, there's some characteristics that are very important. One is observing our motivation. Because when we make a choice, when we do something, together with that action, there is a part of ourselves, our attractions, our aversions, love or jealousy or envy. I mean, there are many things that come with that attachment to our image, or the desire to help others. Many feelings come up, and let's call it the motivation, that which pushes us to do that thing. To And first of all, it's very difficult to have a hundred a motivation that's 100% one thing or another. Our mind is made up of, it's like a it's like a dish made up of many ingredients. There are many different flavors, many different ingredients there's the main ingredient, and then there are many others. And there's some that even if you just put a small amount, it really changes. It has an enormous effect on the dish. So these are called the mental factors. We study these 51 mental factors. Let's call them these ingredients that make up our mind. It's not the moment to talk about the 51 mental factors now. But what happens is, it's important for us to look at what the ingredients are that make up our motivation. Could be I could be in a situation and I have the choice. Shall I help this person or not? Okay. In helping this person, what's my motivation? Why do I want to do it? Do I want to nourish my own ego? Or do I want the person to be happy? Why? Is it because I expect something in return? There can be the thousands of different motivations. Maybe it's a little bit of this and also a little bit of that. And in these cases, it's important for us to connect with the more virtuous part and try to follow that. But in our choices, the motivation is important. So often I say, if someone is very taken by a mental defilement like anger or jealousy, that's not the moment to take a decision, to make a decision. Even if it seems right, one shouldn't do it with that intention. It's like as if you made a delicious dish and then at the end you add arsenic, poison. What happens? You pollute everything. So that's not good. Also, because when we need to act or we take a decision taken by these negative states of mind, negative because the results will bring suffering, arrogance, anger, envy, fear, etc. They generate over time. They are going to reinforce that attitude. And every time I act taken by envy, my envy gets stronger and stronger. Every time I materialize jealousy or miserliness, I'm increasing the strength of that mental defilement. So let's remember that when we make a choice, it's not just the choice that has to do with the 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 object, the external object, but has to do also with our inner development. I remember once I was very young, and the day before I had gone to a small store that was near our house, and it was a little newspaper stand. There was something that I saw that I liked, and the next day it was Saturday or Sunday, and I told my father that I wanted to go and buy that thing at the newspaper stand, and he said, "Yes, you go." And once I got there, it wasn't what I wanted wasn't there anymore. So I thought, okay, well, I'm there. I have money in my pocket. I'll buy something else. And so I bought like a little ball, these bouncing balls. And I got home and my father yelled at me. He said, "But didn't you go to buy that specific thing?" "Yes, but they didn't have that anymore." He said, "Well, why did you buy this?" I said, "Well, because he saw that I had bought something." And he said something like, "It's not that you have to buy something. You know, you should buy something that you need and that it is useful for you, and not get into this mind that you have to buy something. You know, shouldn't have to do it like this." I just remember that it touched me at the time, because what I perceived was not it, it wasn't about buying the ball or the little car, but this inner attitude that I was creating. So when we're faced with an with a external choice that inevitably has an internal component. And and this can be found in everything we do. For example, how often do we have to buy things at the supermarket or to eat or anything else? Very often, no? One of the um, one of the greatest causes of our suffering is our dissatisfaction. And to overcome our dissatisfaction, one key is to know how to discern between what I need, and what I simply just want. The more we are slave to the I want, the more dissatisfied we'll become. As we say, the more um, the more I have, the more I want. So in our daily life, when we go to buy things, I mean, how often do we buy things because we need it? And how often do we buy things because we want it, because we like it? For example, I need to choose what to eat. What would be the wiser way, a way to choose? Should I take what is better for me or what I like more? I should choose what's better for me, but often we choose what we like. I mean, just see when you go to a restaurant, the reference point for the food, for choosing the food, is it about what I like or what is good for us? For most of us, it's it's about what we like. You know, I I I dream um, of a restaurant. Maybe it exists, but I dream of a restaurant, and you have a menu, and there's a questionnaire. Very simple, like some questions. How do you feel? Just to understand your constitution, and at the bottom, according to your answers, um, you get one menu or another, and you have three choices of the things that are good for you, and the other things are excluded. You can't eat them because you go to a restaurant to eat what you need and not just what you like. You know, and we'll give three choices just to be generous with our tastes. My original idea, there were no choices. It was just, this is what's good for you, this is what you should eat. But that would be a total failure. What happens is that when we're faced, or when we're at a restaurant and we need to choose what to eat, or we're at a supermarket and we need to choose what to buy, every time that I buy something because I like it, but I don't really need, I'm reinforcing, even just a little, my conditioning of of following desire. I'm my strength of determination and my ability to choose what I need becomes weaker, and the strength of desire becomes stronger. This doesn't mean that we should be, extremely rigid with ourselves and not do anything that we like. We should, but should have a certain level of, how can I say, we need to keep the reins in our own hands. And often, many of us don't even know where the reins are. But first, we need to take the reins well in our hands, and not be, taken wherever. So what happens is that when we make a choice, when we make a choice like that, when we make any choice, we're reinforcing one trait of ours, one or another. I remember once I was in Tibet and I went to my master very early in the morning, and it was 8 in the morning. But remember that in central Tibet, it's the time of Beijing, so 8 in the morning is 5:30 in the morning actually. Um, so So I mean, the sun was just coming up. It was still dark. It was very cold, and I was I saw a boy there where I was going to receive teachings, and he was bringing water. He had about 20 liters of water, you know, on his back, attached there to his head, and he was bringing them up in very, very steep stairs. The stairs are like this, and he was going up these stairs, four floors, and we're at 4,000 meters high. You know, I could see that even he was a little out of breath, and then he let me go by, and I went to my master at a certain point after the teachings. I asked him, I said, why don't you put a faucet? Because that was the water for drinking and cooking and washing, and I knew that there was a faucet in the courtyard below, and it wouldn't have been difficult to at least bring running water up to the house of the abbot. And he answered me, if the young people don't learn early to work hard for simple things in life, like having water, how is it that they're going to put effort into doing doing more difficult things in the future? And that really touched me because in the morning, but that touched me because if in the morning I need to bring water up, for example, and it's difficult, but um, I'm training myself in not giving importance to the stress of bringing up the water. I am training myself in doing something much more important. I mean, it's true, I can have a faucet and just open up the water, and can have that comfort. But then, you know, but 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 that kind of comfort for meditating. I don't know if you've seen there's no joke, but they've made these kind of helmets that generate a frequency, electromagnetic frequency that inhibits certain parts of the mind, and it helps generate some states of mind. You know, the U.S. Army uses this. A journalist was able to get to this military training base where they're using this technology, and they have a virtual room where one puts a kind of visor. Well, I don't know if one puts it on or not, this kind of visor, for this, and then they have an arm, a weapon in their hand, and they have all these different experiences. They need to kill these various enemies, terrorists, and she got there, and she did this, and she had no military training or anything as a journalist. It was the first time she had done something like this, and it was 5 minutes, and she was there. She tried to protect herself and to kill. She had her point. She didn't get a very good grade, let's say, like it was. And they said, okay, now let's repeat it again. And they put this helmet on it that generates these kind of frequencies that inhibit certain parts of the brain. And she said that when they activated that, it was as if everything went more slowly. She saw everything. She had more concentration. And at the end, it it felt like nothing, no time had gone by. She was very light, but then she wanted to have that helmet again. It seemed like the world was was overwhelming afterwards. After a few days ago, I saw an ad, it, and it said, "This is done to help you go into meditative states." You know, you know. So, but you know, I who knows what kind of damage this does. I'm is worrisome. The main point for me is that we base ourselves on this idea of maximum comfort and minimum effort. But there's some paths that do not come if we do not familiarize ourselves. And that requires time and effort. It's one needs to work hard to train. Someone who's had an physiotherapy, how tiresome is that? I've never done it, but if you've had an operation at your knee and you can't walk, you need the physiotherapy, and and maybe it's extremely painful. It takes a lot of effort, but one wants to walk and one does it. So many things in life require effort. So meditate, facing one's shadows, looking at oneself in the eyes, changing habits. Just, just see how difficult it is to follow a diet, right? It seems it seems something, impossible, but why? It's it's the not being able to eat what I want. It's almost like a rebellion when one doesn't follow a diet. No, because I need to be able to do what I want. I need to be able to do what I want instead of, having this power of control over ourselves. This is the power of being able to do what is good for us, even if it's tiresome. But this is something that we learn. It's not something that's developed from one day to the next. And so bringing water on one's back, up 4 floors. I mean, that boy, beyond just bringing water to his master, to his teacher, he was learning a constancy and putting effort into something important. And this is something extremely important in life. So these are some examples, um, to show that when we're in front of a daily action, no matter how simple it is, or unimportant it is, the choices that we make have a a component that interacts with an inner trait. We ask ourselves, how is it that I am familiarizing myself? You know, so this inner subjective trait of ours. So there is a strong influence. On the other side, we should see what our motivation is. And there's a very important point about making choices. And remember, there's no perfect choice. So I advise you to I say to you, because I've already done it, take away this burden of making the right choice. If I do something and then afterwards it doesn't work, um, there you go, like this, but it doesn't mean that the other thing would have worked. So we need to take away this burden that the choice that we make needs to be the right choice, the perfect choice. It should go as we expect it to go, because we don't have this ability to to see all the variables. I don't have it. I've never known anyone who has. Even a person as wise as Lama Michel Rinpoche, you know, the, he, a perfect, a perfect understanding of all variables. Instead, we just see a small part. This rem- reminds me that when we go to the supermarket, there's a friend of mine who's a graphic artist, and many years ago, he was asked. He worked a lot in advertising, and he was asked to design this wrapping of a product, and I think it was that kind of paper, to wrap food. and he designed this. He designed this wrapping, and once with his wrapping, it started being sold more, and then the then the shops started selling it. They started selling it more expensive, even though they just changed the packaging. So, when we choose something, our reference is external. Is the three things that they write, the references that we have. You know, if if someone tells us that brand isn't good, and we see that, we we don't consider it. But if we see a packaging, we see that like little green logo, and the paper is made on recycled paper. It seems like what's inside is already better, right? And we base ourselves on superficial things. I don't know how many of you, when you're buying your toothpaste, how many of you actually look at the composition of the toothpaste and you try to understand, I try to um, understand how the environment is impacted by the production, by the making of that toothpaste. I mean, how many of us actually put that much effort into in considering and, buying toothpaste? So what happens when we make choices? We make choices on a very superficial level. We don't have a complete vision, and so it's important to know that any choice we make won't be perfect. So let's take away this weight, this burden. And so so the choices won't be the choices aren't the perfect ones, and we have no choice but to choose. So how do we choose? The right choice, in my opinion, from my experience, is when faced with a situation, a choice, is where that inner dialogue stops. Because when there's inner dialogue, should I do this? Should I do that? It means that there's no correspondence between our thoughts and our feelings. There's a part, let's call it our intuition, and our intuition for me is being able to hear that mantra that's being recited under one's breath, or hearing one's own heartbeat. From my own experience, every time I followed my intuition, it worked, even if it seemed like it was crazy. But we need to be able to discern between what is intuition and what is jealousy, anxiety, attachment, because sometimes we have emotions that are not positive, and we can confuse them with intuition. And there's something else. Sometimes we have intuition, and instead of following intuition, we start interpreting it. And once you interpret the intuition, it's no longer intuition. What I try to do for myself is that when I'm in front of a choice and I have some intuition, to understand if that is actually intuition, um, I ask myself, where is it that I'm feeling this, you know, this choice, this idea? If when I think, if it comes, normally the right intuition comes from the heart. Those that are mixed with other emotions, they're um, um, they're often down in the stomach, in the gut. And instead, if it's at our head, it means that we've already gone to analyze. It's no longer an intuition. It's important to see that, and it's important for us to have our own experience. I try once, I try twice. Okay, it's work. So I develop more and more trust in my intuition, remembering that there is no such thing as a perfect choice. I was reflecting today when we started talking, at the beginning, and I wanted to talk about this subject. In my personal experience, the most important choices that I've made in my life that have made the most impact, in my life. They're all choices that I made, not basing myself on a conceptual process. Like, oh, I'm going to do this because then afterwards I'll do that because that will bring me this. No, it wasn't not programmed or having control over life, but there were choices that had inside this strong feeling that that was the right thing to do. That this is the best thing to do. And sometimes with a lot of effort. Um, one choice in particular, it took a lot of effort because conceptually, I was taken to think of doing the opposite. But looking backwards, I'm convinced, I'm sure it was the right choice. And it has to do with when I left my life in the monastery in India and I came to Italy. It was a very difficult period in my life under many aspects. But in those moments, there's a fundamental point, which is, I mean, we to allow ourselves to observe, try to give a little bit of space to our intuition, give space to what others say. And before making the final decision, it's almost as if, how can I say, we it's as if we just put everything up to play. Let me give you an example. When I was making the project for the temple, for example, I had made a project. I spoke with Lama Ganchen about it, and it's different than what exists today. I had put a tremendous amount of energy and time into the project. Um, you know, you know, even the whole project with even all of the all the lighting system and the all etc. That was all finished. And then once we met Shirley, she's someone who has offered a little bit more than a third of the cost of the kind of reconstruction of the temple. So we wanted to give her, we wanted to hear what she had to say, and she, in a very educated and in a very delicate way, she said, "Oh, maybe this isn't a good way. Maybe we should do this." And my first reaction was being on the defense, like, "Oh, you have no idea how much energy I've put into this." And there was some kind of resistance to change, not because I was convinced that what I have is better, but because there's a part of the ego that doesn't want to accept that it's better to do differently. And I remember this little inner battle, or like, oh, how is it possible? Until there was a moment where I said to myself, okay, let me open myself up really to other possibilities. And opening myself up to other possibilities doesn't mean that what I did is horrible and is worthless. But let me see if and then let's just start from zero. Let's take into consideration the advice that was given seriously, then not and let's take away this attachment of wanting to be right, or take away also the this, this attachment to all the work that I put into this, and the costs. Let's just look at everything with a really open mind. And it's there I started to see, and I remember very, very well that morning. I had seen very, very, I, I made a sketch, and I just felt a tremendous amount of joy. It was like a puzzle that wasn't really well put together, but it seemed like it was. And at a certain point, when you start moving things, able to see that you're able to fit everything perfectly, and there was that feeling of, okay, yeah, like this is right. And I remember I called the architect and I said, okay, we have to change everything. And then I showed it to the architect and he said, you're right, it's better like this. So what's important in front of choices is to not have the attachment of being right, to not have the attachment of making the right decision. Sometimes we need to change. And when we do what is what corresponds better, there's something inside of us that tells ourselves that we're doing the right thing. People say, well, how did you, um, how is it that you went to India at 12 years old? I, I don't know. There was a deep, deep feeling inside that was telling me that I was doing the right thing. I felt at home, that feeling of doing the right thing. And so I invite you is to try to create moments in your life to listen your intuition better, to learn also to have more sensitivity. And let's remember that when we develop our sensitivity more, we need to be careful to not get into a process of, how can I say, to try to conceptualize what's happening. If I have a then it can happen that okay, we have a feeling, okay, this is this, this is that, and maybe we get into to to states of great paranoia. No, we need to be in contact with our world, touch the earth, but learn how to listen on the various levels that exist. And for this, something that can help us is to diminish the unnecessary choices. This reminds me, I, I, I saw a documentary that talked a lot about, the people, who had great success in business, and one was actually a scientist who had developed certain things, and he had developed products. Um, he he was an inventor. Had invented Segway, for example. He invented also a water filter. Um, so you know, s- so he did many, many beautiful things. And in this man's house, at a certain point, he opened up his closet. He had like 50 pairs of pants, and they were all the same. He said, "I had these are the only clothes I have, because 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 I never take a vacation from work, and in this time in my life, I'm I'm working. What do I eat? I don't know. I eat what they give me, you know. What appointments do I have? I don't know. It's organized for me because my mind should not be taken up by these choices. Because if I use up my space with what I need to eat, how I'm supposed to dress, what what um, you know, what what road I need to take to get to work. In his case, it was just a helicopter. But what happens is that the more small choices that we have to make in our daily lives, that takes up space in an important way. So being able somehow to make the choices that we want to make with joy, you know. We don't all need to use the same toothpaste, but once we have a toothpaste that we like, we don't need to change it every week. Let's remember that the space that we have inside is limited, and the more control that we try to have over the world around us, make sure that everything is as the way we want it, the more that space is taken up. I realized when I restructured the house in India, which was the house where I lived for 12 years, the house of Lama Ganchen. I started restructuring this house at the beginning because the bathrooms were horrible. They were really just, according to our culture, I mean, they just didn't work. Mostly the shower, use just the bucket. But there was also just a tiny, tiny little tube, so water would fill up and then the water would drain out onto the courtyard and to the monks below, and you needed to see what time of the day to take a shower. It didn't work. And so once I restructured that, and I said, oh, we're doing this, we might as well do that, we might as well do this other thing too. And at a certain point, I wanted to put I wanted to fix just about everything. I mean, the walls weren't straight, and the light wasn't nice. The cabinets in the kitchen weren't working. uh, the table wasn't stable, etc., etc. Well, one thing after the next, until one day my master Kanlaktala, he said, he was a very practical man. It was very practical also in construction. He was in charge of that for the monastery. He said, listen, you're doing this restructuring and you've done a lot and there's a lot more that you want to do. Anything that you think is necessary, I'm here to help you. But remember that desire has no end. And I realized that the more I did, the more dissatisfied I was. Because more I did, the more I saw that things that weren't right. What does it matter to me if the wall is straight or not? Nothing. But when I start to see this, some of this bothers me here, bothers me there. So the more control we try to have, the more that we, the more our space is taken up, gets used up, and we lose this ability to intuition, to feel. We become more fragile. Our happiness becomes more fragile. So I invite each one of you to try to better your intuition, your sensitivity, and lessen the noise, turn down the noise around us. And also, let's remember that daily choices, no matter how um, how unimportant they may seem, they take up space, you know. And if one feels that there are too many choices and not able to do them, um, well, if you have trouble with the too many small choices to make, and then you find yourself to make a large choice, it can happen that you don't have trust in yourself. So so try to give space to what is more important. And what's really important is having space for silence. Um, s- this, being more contact with what's inside and less with outside of us. This possibility of giving time to things. And when we make choices, remember that we don't have control over anything. We just have this small ability to interact, but we don't have control. And then we relax. But let's do our best following our motivation, our intuition. This is what I wanted to share today. To give importance, as I said before, One of the most important point here is to remember that when we make choices, there's an inner component that we're transforming, not just the external aspect of the choice, and this should be taken into consideration. Okay, let's make our final dedications.
Jetsu alame kotse rapten chi namkara trile chokchur gepadang losan tempe drume sasomki drove munsela takto ne gyur chi kewa kunto yanda lama dang dralme cheki pela longche ching sadan lamge yunte rabzo ne dorje change kopa nyurtob Sho nimo dele tsendele nime kuyan delekshin Nintzen takto delek pe kuncho sumki chingi lof Kuncho sumki ngodrubutsol Kuncho sumki trashisho
At dawn or at dusk, at night or midday, may the three jewels grant us their blessings. May they help us to achieve all realizations and sprinkle the path of our lives with various signs of auspiciousness.
Buona giornata a tutti. Grazie mille.
Have a good day. Thank you very much.